Advocacy group Africa Unite is calling for the protection as well as the proper integration of foreign nationals in South African communities. This after the fatal shooting of two Somali nationals in Philippi. The group is condemning the targeting of foreign nationals and particularly small businesses that are owned by foreign nationals. It has also raised concerns over government's proposal to audit foreign-owned spaza shops. For more on this, we speak to Africa Unite spokesperson Lelethu Nogwavu. A very good morning to you, Ms. Nogwavu. Thank you for your time today. The issue of foreign-owned spaza shops, and I guess spaza shops in general, has really been in the spotlight recently, largely because of expired food being sold and that leading to children buying, eating, and then dying in many cases, in some of these cases, from this food. Why then do you have a problem with spaza shops being targeted, and specifically foreign-owned spaza shop, understanding the reasoning behind it?
I think let me clarify this firstly, that we do also condemn the selling of illicit goods, the selling of expired food and all that. But what we are saying is that, firstly, let us not target or let us not use specifically words like foreign nationals and specifically target foreign nationals, because those then end up breeding xenophobic attacks and they end up breeding all this violence that we see. So, for instance, this killing, one of the causes of these killings that we've been seeing of foreign nationals, especially spaza shop owners, is because of these narratives that we're putting out. Of course, it's completely wrong for people to sell expired food and illicit goods, but let's make sure we do not, in the process of condemning that, raise xenophobic rhetorics and, raise all these narratives about migrants, because then it brings a blanket and it generalizes that all migrants are doing this. And then we end up having then situations of xenophobic attacks. We end up having these flare-ups of xenophobic attacks. So yes, we definitely do condemn those illicit goods. We condemn expired food being sold to communities, especially, townships, because they're already very vulnerable communities. But what we are saying is that let us not target migrants. Let's not use narratives that will breed xenophobia in the process.
And it's worth remembering as well, Lelethu, that the spaza shops that were basically looked into did not only just belong to foreign nationals. There are South Africans as well that were found, to be owning these spaza shops and also selling, goods that had been expired. So it's fair to say it is across the board and not just foreign nationals who are doing this. I'm quite interested in your comments regarding what Minister Aaron Motsoaledi was saying when he was speaking about immigration. And one of the things that he said is he's calling on South Africans to help him draft a policy on how to deal with foreign nationals and how to deal with immigrants. What is your reaction to that, and what did you take out of it as the organization Africa Unite?
See, that's exactly the point. You just raised now what I was raising, is that why are we specifically having, for instance, laws for migrants when there's also local business owners who also own spaza shops, right? So if we are going to audit spaza shop owners, let's audit all of them and not specifically say migrants, because it's those narratives, it's those thoughtful processes that then end up breeding xenophobia, that end up breeding violence, that end up breeding the looting that we see and the targeting of foreign nationals as well as the killing. So let's make sure that even if we audit, we do not condemn the auditing and paying off tax, but let's do it in a general approach, in a holistic approach that doesn't target specific groups of people who are already vulnerable in communities, right? We already know the vulnerability that comes with being a migrant. So if we think and we speak in ways that will, other them and will cause them to be more vulnerable and make them, to be attacked in communities, communities, then we are breeding xenophobia. And we can't be doing that. But the thing is, another thing that has to be raised is the fact that obviously we are approaching elections now. So we'll see a lot of government officials, we'll see a lot of politicians using these anti-migrant sentiments. And the fear in that is that it's going to keep on raising these attacks, it's going to keep on raising these killings, of which migrants are protected by the Constitution as well as the Refugee Act. So what we want to make sure is that we then educate each other and try and understand the fact that we cannot other certain people, especially vulnerable groups. Let's make sure we do things in a holistic manner.
How do you deal with South Africans who say, migrants, refugees, that's one section and that's a different story? What about those who are in the country illegally and do not have the permits? Some saying that they're the ones that are getting employment over and above South Africans, and yet they actually don't have the right paperwork. How do you address that type of rhetoric?
I think that specifically needs an education. Public education is very important in that regard. And that's one of the things that we do in our work. We make sure we try to go into communities, that they understand these terminologies. The terminologies are very simple, but it's very difficult for people to understand because of the narratives that are there in the media. For instance, refugees, it's very difficult for refugees to live in South Africa because obviously they leave their countries in very dire situations and they try and seek asylum in South Africa. They try and seek protection. But now you get then South Africans who are not aware of that fact that people left their country in a dire situation or they were attacked or their life was a threat. So you get them being attacked again in South Africa because of this lack of understanding, the lack of education. So we need to then have education about what is an illegal immigrant and what are the repercussions of being an illegal immigrant. We need to understand what is a refugee, what rights do they have. We need to understand what is a migrant in general, what is an asylum seeker. So we try and then simplify those concepts. We take them into communities, and that's the huge part of the work that we do. And I think it has to intensify now because obviously, like I've stated, that we are close to elections and a lot of xenophobic attacks are going to flare up because of these narratives being raised, you know, with political parties and their manifestos and all that. It's mostly anti-migrant rhetorics, and it's going to cause a lot of violence and chaos. So we have to try and make sure we then educate ourselves, we educate others in communities and make sure that everyone understands so that we do not get these attacks, we don't get people being killed in communities.
Lelethu Nogwavu, thank you so much for your time today, expressing, quite passionately the need to educate communities and the need to understand that some people may be in the country because of the dire situation that they are experiencing in their own countries. She is spokesperson for the organization Africa Unite.